I love it. Some tropical music to come in. I'm wearing a tropical shirt right now. You can't see it if you're listening on the podcast side, but it is because we are officially on vacation mode. The NBA season is over. The Warriors, the winners this year. I think, at least on social media, by the time we were going into game 6, I think a lot of people were already calling that the Warriors were going to win it all. And that came to fruition just the other night as of recording this. Steph Curry obviously named finals MVP. So everyone's talking about, putting him in the top 10 now, which I think, Kevin, you talked about last episode, saying if he did get it, then he's fully there. But I don't think he
Yeah.
fully needed it to justify it. But
No.
I get the argument that everybody was having over that. I also would like to point out, if you Google NBA Finals or if you Google Warriors, little fireworks pop up as which I found today while doing some show prep. So,
Well, and so we go back to our streak. We talked about at the very end of last episode. We talked about kind of the parity that the NBA has seen with a number of different champions recently, which is something that in a league full of dynasties, and obviously we'll talk about the Warriors because without a doubt a dynasty. Here in a little bit. I mean, certainly. I mean, look over the course of this podcast. We're 9 seasons now, and the Warriors have won 4 times. There's no one else that's even in the planet. And I mean, 2 of the times they've been in the finals and have fell to Toronto and of course Cleveland in 2016. 4 different NBA champions. The streak continues. Toronto. It would have been 5 had the Celtics won, because then you would have the Warriors in 2018. But with the Warriors, you can put them back on the end of this list now again. So you got Raptors, you got Lakers, Bucks, and now Warriors. Of course, I mean, congratulations to the Warriors again. Of course, back on top. I mean, we'll get into the X's and O's of games 5 and 6 here in a second, but I mean, I think right off the rip, not just with the finals MVP with Steph, because that was a foregone conclusion this series. He by far was the best player in the series individually.
I so badly wish, I know it wasn't going to happen, but I think it was after maybe it was game 4, possibly whenever Wiggins really had like the 16 rebound 5. Okay. When Wiggins started doing be good, I was like, okay, if he plays well enough, I'm gonna start being like the should Wiggins get finals MVP.
We're not doing this again. No disrespect to Andre Iguodala, but we're not doing this again.
Yeah.
And I mean, see, that was and game 5 to me. I mean, when I look at the series overall, I mean, that really was. I mean, statistically, always in best of 7, the game 5s are important. But I think even after game 4, the way that Steph had gone supernova, I still had plenty of reasons to feel good if I'm Boston, knowing that, they had seen similar barrages from Jimmy Butler in the conference finals and Giannis in the second round of them just going supernova and carrying their team, but you feeling better about how you played for large portions of the game. To me, game 5 is when the alarm bells started to go off, not just because they had lost back-to-back either, but I mean, for the large portion of that game, Steph Curry, I mean, that's one of the worst games he's ever played in the playoffs. Just 16 points, 7 to 22 from the field, obviously 0 from 9 from beyond the arc, snapping that streak. And I think if you see that, if you put a box score in front of me and you go, that was Steph Curry's line after we saw what it took to beat them in game 4, I don't think there's any planet where the Warriors win that game.
Right.
And yet they won that game by 10 points. It wasn't even like, it was a pretty comfortable win for the most part on their home floor. It was the other guys stepping up. Obviously, that was Wiggins, breakout game, if you will, 26 and 13. Klay Thompson had 21. I thought that was his best game of the series. Jordan Poole had 14. Gary Payton the second had 15. Draymond had 8, which I know that sounds crazy, but like when Draymond is giving you even a little bit like that, you got to feel pretty good about your chances. And that was kind of the moment too, because I just go back to that fourth quarter, because Boston in that game, I mean, it was the opposite of the script, right? Boston just blew the doors off the Warriors in the third quarter. They stormed all the way back. It looked like they were in a really good position to put themselves going into a game 6 with a chance to clinch. Instead, just completely run out of gas in the fourth quarter. And that's really where I think I started to see a little bit too with Boston. Just with Tatum, with Brown, not necessarily Marcus Smart in game 5. I mean, he had 20 points in that game, but I mean, Jaylen Brown was 5 of 18 from the field. That was probably one of Tatum's better games, actually. He was shooting 50% that game, but it didn't look like they had the lift in the fourth quarter. It's an eye test thing, but it just seems like, Tatum had nothing going. on the drive, and I think that was one of I think that to me is the area where he probably needs to focus on the most. Is I think he just needs to get better at finishing through
Well, and
contact.
so here's my whole thought with Tatum, and I get right the criticism. I get it. He didn't play great. Um, there are times where it was like he was doing a lot more than just the like his scoring wasn't great, but he was still doing a lot on the court in general and helping the team. And so I get where the criticism comes from, but at the same time, it's like the dude's 24. Like I get it. He's still really young. And
Yeah,
so to be critical of it, I understand, but I think the follow-up can be he's only 24, so and this was his first experience in this situation, so like the best is still yet to come from Tatum in my opinion.
well, and so I don't want to get too far into it because we're going to talk the future of the Warriors
Right.
and the Celtics here in a little bit. For anyone listening, show notes: the Warriors winning the title is our warm up jumper this week. So
Yeah.
we're getting to it right away. We don't want to waste any time, but yeah, I mean, both things can be true. Like it's as simple as Jason Tatum. You have to be impressed with what he did to get here. I mean, they got to the NBA Finals. Look at the teams they beat.
They
They beat the
were they
defending
were
champion Milwaukee Bucks. They swept Brooklyn out of here. Like they got Miami out on their home floor in Game 7. That can all be great, and Jason Tatum can be a borderline top 10 player. That's all true. He also can have had a terrible NBA
yeah.
Finals. Like it just happens
Yeah.
sometimes. Like guys have bad series.
Well, and
The
it's worth
Celtics as a whole just really were out of sync offensively. And I mean, that was the story of the series. It was the turnovers. The Celtics, defensively, they were fine. There wasn't a moment where I felt like the Celtics did a bad job. Hell, outside of game one was the only game where, I mean, they just weren't covering Steph Curry, it felt like. And then they still ended up winning that game. It wasn't the defense. People will vaunt or be like, the Celtics defense couldn't get the job done against Steph. Steph is Steph. Like that's the thing is
Mhm.
you throw everything that you can at Steph, and that's just how special he is. You can have three guys draped all over him, and he still because it wasn't even about. It's not always been about the 3-point shooting with Steph Curry. It's about the fact that he layups you to death too, and I feel like that really doesn't get enough credit. Like Steph is so good at getting to the hole and finishing there, and if he gets fouled, he's going to bury the free throws with how good of a shooter he is. So it's especially again when you have guys like Draymond Green, who was just up until the clinching game of the series was a complete non-shooting factor. The fact what he's able to do with those guys keyed on him just shows that it doesn't matter how good your defense is. Like when you have a game breaker on offense like that, we're talking quite literally one of the most, if not the most gifted offensive player to ever pick up a
Right.
basketball. Like you just gotta tip your hat sometimes. And the other thing is just the Warriors, man. We talk about the Celtics defense. The Warriors D'd up like straight. They held the Celtics under 100
Mhm.
points multiple times. Again, for as much as Tatum struggled, I think a lot of that too. Give Andrew Wiggins his credit. Andrew Wiggins did a great job on Jason Tatum. Draymond Green we talked about me specifically in Game 3. There were moments where I felt like they needed to bench him. He was so ineffective. It was just like if he's not going to give you anything and he's bad on the defensive end,
Right.
it's like what are we doing here at this point? Like you start to see the red flags go off. He was absolutely phenomenal in Game 5 and Game 6, especially in Game 6. He put his imprint all over that game. And I know he tweeted afterwards when he showed up in all black. He said, "No, it was for a funeral." And he played like it was for a funeral. I mean, stopping that Boston run with the perimeter jumper, what on earth? Where is that coming from? Like the court
Right.
cashing 2 3-pointers, we haven't seen that in a while. But more importantly, again, it's just the passing, it's the way that he pushes the ball in transition, and it's just his defensive IQ. He was everywhere blowing that Celtics offense up, creating a lot of those turnovers. And so, yeah, I do. I think the Celtics need to get better offensively for sure. But I also think like the Warriors defense really, really brought it this series. They stepped up. Kevon Looney was great in the interior. Even Steph, man, Steph will never be known as a great defender. I thought he held his own. And more importantly,
Mhm.
the energy was there. Like as long as he's giving you that energy, what else can you say when your captain's leaving it all out there on the floor like that? So just really, really, I mean, it
Right.
was championship DNA. This is what it does. And for the Warriors, I think you saw how much this meant to them, man. Like, you know what it was to be back on
Right.
top, for Klay Thompson to not be, to not be playing basketball for 2 years. The Warriors were the worst team in the league 2 years ago. And that's what's crazy.
Yeah.
That's what's a complete afterthought in this. They completely bricked the number 2 pick so far. James Wiseman has been a complete non-factor because of injury. I mean, you could add LaMelo Ball. You could add literally anyone that would have put on a uniform and been in that rotation. And it just, it didn't matter. They believed in their core. And I thought one thing that, after game 5, Brian Windhorst on ESPN talked about it being a checkbook win. And I just thought that was really disingenuous. Like, I didn't think, yes, the Warriors owners spend. Good. They're billionaires. They should be spending. If you are a billionaire who owns a sports team and you are not spending to make your team better, I don't understand the point of owning a sports team. Like, I'm not going to fault the owners for spending the money and being willing to go into the luxury tax, but their whole core is homegrown. So you're spending the money on your homegrown core. Even a guy like Kevon Looney is a guy you drafted. The Warriors won this title winning around the margins. Otto Porter's on a veteran minimum. Gary Payton II was bouncing around on 10 days and in the G League. Jordan Poole was in the G League. Like, this isn't the Warriors just buying players. And it was different when KD was there because of a one-time big hike, obviously. But, this is not a checkbook win.
I agree. I get what you're saying. And I had this stat. I was going to bring it up when we talk. It was going to be more talking about the future, which, like we said, we're going to bring up after our little intro we do here in a second. But I think this stat at least kind of speaks to what you were talking about, what Windhorst said with the checkbook win. They do have the most expensive roster in the NBA, as they should, with the players that they have. But it's somewhere up around $350 million in tax payments, where like the next closest Nets, Clippers, Bucks, Lakers spend around $200 million. So it is a lot more. Again, I'm with you of the belief that, like, if you have a team that's homegrown like that, you pay to make it happen.
Pay your guys.
I think Windhorst in that talked about how they did certain things within the stadium to get other people involved to help pay for this stuff like that. Like, look, if you can make it work, you can make it work. And I'm not going to hate it either, but it is definitely something to point out that they are spending so much more than other teams. But I think you have to do it when you have a roster like that that's been built like that. Like, if it were any other team and it was 3 homegrown guys like that were the main core going forward, I think you have to do it. Now, to that, something that bothered me, and it might just be because we're like, I don't know, more NBA nerds than we are like a casual fan. The thing that was bothering me, and I get it, I'm gonna say this, that I understand it's the core, Klay, Steph, and Draymond. But in that last game, in Game 6, man, when they were throwing, going to commercial or coming back, and they're throwing highlights of Klay and Steph and Draymond, and I was like, man, if I'm Wiggins, I'm pissed off because he's easily the second best player right now. Like, not getting any love on this B-roll.
No, but I don't agree with that. Wiggins' star is shining bright right now. His stock is so much higher than it's ever been.
But they're doing this whole, like,
in his role.
But like, Klay's out there getting like he's in the posters and they're showing Tatum and Brown versus Steph and Klay, and I was like, come on, man, you got to throw Wiggins on that, man.
Wiggins is great, man.
Right,
he's going to be a big part of the future. He'll get plenty of his reps, but
I know.
It was, man, and I mean that's just the thing is. I mean, because even with Andre Iguodala, because that very well could have been his last game. This is a celebration of the core because, I mean, again, win the title in 2015, super impressive. When you got KD, it was inevitable. That's what became with the Warriors. Is just there was no doubt about it. Like, those Cavs teams were great too, but they just, after 2016, they were never going to be able to compete. But when Kevin Durant leaves, like, you're in a situation then where, the Warriors won before KD. That was always the thing. So you never needed to really validate anything. You knew what this core was. But for them to get back and win the title again, 3 years again after being in the finals for the last time, being as bad as they were for a little bit. Again, worst record in the league. I mean, even last year, they were in the play-in game last year. They were getting bounced by Memphis at this point. So I mean, it's just a remarkable turnaround, and they didn't need any of this. Steph Curry didn't need a Finals MVP. They all didn't need this
Right.
fourth title to solidify anything. They were always going to be one of the best cores that we've ever seen, but they are now. They're in that. This Warriors core with these particular three, like it's in the pantheon of the best teams that we've seen recently. When you talk about the Spurs in the 2000s, you talk
Yeah.
about the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, and then later on again with Kobe, with those Celtics in the 80s, with the Lakers in the 80s, like those great teams. When you talk about it, you got to put the Warriors in that conversation. I mean,
I agree.
it's absolute excellence. We can debate Steph Curry's place. I think he was top 10 before. I don't understand how he cannot be top 10 after the way this has gone and with how much hoop he's going to have left here. Still just 34 years old. I think his game is going to age great. So, but yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? You got to tip the cap. They showed it those last two games, and I think that's where, again, we're going to talk futures here in a little bit, but their experience, them being there in the moment, to be able to close out a game in the finals in Boston, a place that's only ever happened twice in history. This is the second time. It's really impressive. And I mean, we're going to have a whole summer to talk about their legacies and celebrate, but they got healthy and they made the run.
And like you said, we're going to talk about the future here in a second, but I do want to point out, like, you look at the team and obviously they already opened as the favorites for next year, deservingly so. They do have a younger team, so you can argue the future is pretty easy to see, which, again, like I said, we'll get to in a second. But my last question is, do you like the pettiness at the end when they're in the press conference calling out Jaren Jackson and ESPN reporters, and they had all the receipts?
Yeah, I mean, look, they have the right to do that as champions. I understand it. I did think the Jaren Jackson one was funny, just because it's from Clay. My favorite tweet, which, again, they won the game, it doesn't matter. But Clay was horrible in game 6. He had 12 points, 5 of 20 from the field, a number of open looks that just weren't falling.
That's why I was getting so mad that Wiggins wasn't on this B-roll. I was like, come on, man.
We know, man. We know. But I'm saying with Clay, one of my favorite tweets was somebody said it was game 0.6 Clay. I wish I remembered who it was, but I legitimately laughed out loud at that. That was hilarious. But no, I love it. I mean, Clay, look, they remembered. Obviously, Dre is always going to get his licks off, but I mean, Steph Curry's heard all that non-finals MVP talk and how ridiculous that was. So of course, what else is he? He put him to sleep. Like, you can't say anything anymore. It's bulletproof. It's just one of those wins. It feels like what it did for LeBron in Cleveland. Like, this ring means so. And again, they've said it as much on Draymond's show afterwards. Both he and Clay were talking about it. Like, they didn't sugarcoat how much this one in particular meant to them. Because it's hard to get back. It's when the dynasty starts to fade, you do have those questions. What it reminded me of? It reminded me of Tim Duncan after 14 when he was talking about it, and Ginobili and Tony Parker, because they had won together obviously multiple times, but it was 07, and then there was a gap there where they were still good, but they weren't winning titles, and then of course you have that just absolute heartbreaking, as bad of a loss as you can get in the finals to the Heat with the Ray Allen shot and then losing game 7, that to be able to get back that following year in 2014, you can see how much it meant to him.
Yeah.
And I think how much it really helped solidify his legacy too, as a top 10 player, 5-time champion, tying him in terms of rings with Kobe for the most in that era. That's what this is. They didn't need any of it, but they got it now. And so, you got to put some respect on. There's no doubt about it now. Welcome, everybody, to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Justin Kuzart.
Got a lot of real estate.
Oh, no. Is this Jaren Jackson's response? Did he tweet back?
That was Ja Morant's response.
Oh, all right. I mean, look, they were going at it. They were beefing. We understand what we said. That series was going to be spicy. It was. I can't wait for the first games next year when these two are back on the floor. I mean, this goes back to the playing game the year before. Look, the Grizzlies were not scared of the Warriors. You got to respect it. The downside of talking trash is when you talk a lot of trash, sometimes you might get to talk back a little bit. But that's the beauty of it. We love this. Like, I want these guys going at each other. There's a respect there. We know that all these guys respect each other. They don't, do that after the game. Do that in Cancun when everybody's on vacation. Right
when they're all wearing their Hawaiian shirts,
Yeah. So, wearing the Hawaiian shirts in Mexico.
Yeah, well, it happens. But yes, give us a follow on YouTube. We have a, YouTube page. You can watch a video version and see my Hawaiian shirt that I'm wearing.
Yeah.
YouTube, just search Drive and Dish NBA.
Yeah, and follow the podcast anywhere. Leave us a review on iTunes. Go to Battle, read them on the podcast, Stitcher, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music. Yeah, literally anywhere you find a podcast, we're there. There's not a
Mhm.
doubt. And now a word from our sponsors.
So we talk about the future of both teams. It's kind of what we've been doing with the other teams that get eliminated from the finals. Obviously, there's no more eliminations to go for because the Celtics the last ones to get eliminated, and the Warriors the champs. So let's start with the champs, and what is next for the guys. Obviously, draft day in a week as of recording this, less than a week on Thursday as of recording this. For the Warriors, already opening, by the way, for like we referenced earlier, opening the sports book as the favorites for next year. I think a big part of it is the younger core that isn't the main three, right? Like you have Clay, Dre, Steph, but then you look at it, you got Jordan Poole, who's 22, Kuminga's 19, Wiseman, who you referenced. I know there's injury concerns, but he's only
Get
21.
anything.
You got Moody on the bench too, who's 20. Like you've got young talent.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see where it goes. A lot of their role players will hit the open market this summer. Looney and Gary Payton going to be looking for raises. Obviously, they had some pretty big contributions throughout the regular season and the playoffs. And then that brings back the conversation of money, which we already talked about. At some point, they might have to figure that out. I mean, I think the conversation you were referring to, the interview on ESPN, the comparison was to the Bulls, who ended up having to make adjustments to their lineup back in the day because of money problems, and that's a big part of what the Last Dance was all about. Um, but if you have management, ownership that's willing to spend the money, you can delay the quote unquote last dance, and keep it rolling. And I think when you see the young potential, the young, backup, the young bench, the young guys that also are on this team, it really does extend the lifespan of what they can continue to do. They have in the draft, they've got the number 28 in the first round, number 51 and 55 in the second round. So they could be adding some talent there, and that could help them depending on if they do or do not want to pay Looney and Peyton. So I think for the Warriors, weirdly enough, like the future is really bright. And I get it, they just won, so it should be bright. But I mean, like in terms of like the next 5 years, I think they're still gonna be rolling.
I mean, the youth infusion was key, and I mean that's what it
Yeah.
was. Wiggins was a little different, obviously, because he came in with a big contract, but that's
Right.
obviously paid dues, and you've got him locked up, so
He
you
was
don't have
worth
to
it.
worry
Yeah.
about anything on that front because he clear. I mean, he's already getting paid a max deal basically, but
Yeah.
certainly played himself into some more money over the course of these finals. I mean, look, there's a couple things. Look, at the end of the day, Steph Curry and his game aging well, and him being a just bona fide superstar is going to allow your window to stay open as long as you wanted to. I do think Klay Thompson is starting to lose a step defensively, and I worry
Yeah.
about that. But again, he shoots the basketball. Like that's the skill that as long as he can keep hitting threes,
Do you
he's going to
think?
have a spot.
Let me ask you this: do you think there's any point? Maybe it's not next year, but do you think there's any point where the Warriors consider breaking up the three to get more either depth or young youth or talent around Steph?
I mean, maybe, but no, I can't see them trading anybody. I still think Draymond is too important.
Right.
Just being the engine and the heart and soul of that organization. I think also as well, like to put it bluntly, I don't know. Like you need to be in a specialized situation if you're trading for Draymond Green on that money. I
Right.
think
Right.
he clearly makes teams better. Like the dude's a certified winner, but I'm not, for example, if like I'm a random mid-tier team, I'm not going to trade for Draymond Green and expect him to take me over the top. Like the him and Steph combo is what's special. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
no, I think all three of them probably finish their careers in the Bay. I would be really surprised if they go elsewhere. And I mean, they talked about that again on the on Draymond show. I mean, Iguodala is going to retire. That looks like it's a lock. Obviously, I think if Iggy wants to coach anywhere, he'll be able to do that. I mean, one of the most respected vets in the league. We can, if he
Maybe
decides
not.
to.
Maybe not in Memphis.
Well, yeah, you're right. He will definitely not be in Memphis, but anywhere else. Um, and then you're right though. You kind of hit it though. The role players are the most important here. Gary Payton in particular should get a lot of money. He was phenomenal for them in the finals and really over this playoff run, even before he got hurt and just missed that time. Um,
Otto
in
Porter
terms of
was I didn't mention him, but he played well
no, Otto
in some
Porter's up.
stretches.
Oh, and that's the other one. So when I look at Looney, Payton, and Porter, I don't think they can bring all three back. I think obviously the Warriors should attempt to bring all three back. And if there's a way, you should absolutely. But, it sure seems like Otto Porter, who's been a solid vet in this league for a long time now, has kind of played himself into some money here. Same with Looney. I mean, Looney got drafted by the squad. So maybe, again, maybe he gives them a little bit of a hometown discount. But in terms of the other ones, if you get two of those three back, I think you feel pretty good. And even with Porter, I think Kuminga's emergence, because that's the thing is like Jonathan Kuminga showed flashes. He's so raw that like imagine now with him getting a full summer of NBA workouts and with some
Yeah.
reps under his belt. It feels like he's going to be one of the big pieces of the future no matter what. Like I really think they got a good one with him. And then obviously just being around those guys, just being able to, basically sponge up all their knowledge and habits and things like that. So and Wiseman is house money to me at this point. I mean, that's what's crazy is it's like if you could just get Wiseman on the floor and being healthy,
Yeah.
Looney becomes massively expendable if you get anything out of James Wiseman. That's just a big if at this point. I mean, we were expecting him to be back kind of midway. We didn't even see him play at all this year. So we'll see what happens on that front. I mean, obviously they're still rooting for him, and we hope he can get back in the game. But Wiseman, I don't want to sound like a jerk, but he feels like more of a concept than a reality at this point. Like
Sure.
if he plays, great. If not, the Warriors are going to move on without him. But I'm interested to see what the money looks like and how many of those role guys they can bring back. Because you're right, I think that's the key. But I think they're in a position to defend. I don't know that like the West is going to be better next year. Specifically the Clippers. If the Clippers get healthy, I mean, their depth. We saw what their depth did this year, just without PG for
Yeah.
a large portion of the year, without
Why?
Kawhi at all. If you get those two back into the lineup, it sure feels like they can get as good as anybody. Denver also with Jamal Murray coming back, and then if Michael Porter Jr. is healthy as well, should be a whole lot better next year. But the Warriors are going to be in a position to defend, and that's the thing is they're already in rarefied air as it is. Once they start getting all the way, if they start winning 5 and 6, we start talking about maybe the greatest ever.
Well, so in terms of the teams that have the best odds for next year, it is the Warriors, and then the next team out of the West would be the Clippers.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Clippers, yeah. So it's Warriors. So I'll just give you the top 5. It's Warriors, Celtics, who we'll talk about here in a second. The Nets, Clippers, Bucks, Suns, Lakers.
The Nets are higher than the Bucks.
The Nets are 2. Yeah, the Nets are 3. Bucks are 5.
That's so disrespectful. That's so disrespectful and unserious. If Chris Middleton doesn't get hurt, we could very well be having a Bucks conversation right now. I'm not saying it's a lock, but Middleton going down kind of shot
I
there.
feel like for the Suns, it's pretty disrespectful too.
Suns are improvement mode to me. I'm disgusted the way the Suns went out. I'm so disappointed in how that Phoenix team went out. I also think there's the uncertainty with Ayton. That's the other real that's the non-emotional part of it. I think is the uncertainty with Ayton. You don't know what that's going to look like next year.
If anything, the most disrespectful is anybody that's after the Lakers, who are right after the Suns, by the way. Teams that are right after the Lakers, the Heat, the Mavericks, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, the 76ers.
That's disgusting. And on every one of those accounts, that's disgusting.
Yeah, the Lakers are, what is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're 7th. And they're tied with the Heat in terms of
that's insane.
Odds.
Well, all right, don't bet that. All right, so back to the Celtics, the second odds, as you would expect from the losers of the finals. I mean, here's the thing. As much as anything is, because it sure feels like this core is going to get back, right? Like the way they bonded this season, the way they turned it around.
Well, and I think that's a big part of what should be talked about this offseason. I mean, they were 25-25 through the first 50 games.
They were horrible.
Mm-hmm. Like we talked about, they had a players-only meeting like 3 weeks into the season. But like you said, their core Their guys are under contract until 24, 25. So in terms of like running it back, you can pretty much do that. Al Horford is an unrestricted free agent in 23, 24. He's obviously getting older. So depending on how that goes, Grant Williams, also a restricted free agent in 23, 24. He's making 4.3 million next year. He's eligible for a rookie contract extension this offseason, so we'll see if he does that. Maybe he waits and tests the restricted free agency in 2023. I don't know. But really, other than that, that's like in terms of having to shore up things from the Celtics side, they're already locked down. Like, I mean, if Al Horford and Grant Williams are your two main concerns on how you approach their restricted or unrestricted free agency going forward, and then there you go. I mean, they don't have a first round pick in this draft. They do have a second round pick, which I believe is number 53 overall, if I have that right. So, I mean, in terms of offseason, unless you're going to make a big trade and really shake it up, I don't think you're going to do a big flashy move this season or
No,
this
I don't.
offseason.
No, and I don't think you need to. Like
You
that's the
don't.
thing is, the way they've turned it around, like it's really one of the most remarkable turnarounds in NBA history. And I think that this is a Celtics team that Boston fans should be proud of. I know they obviously fell a little bit short of the goal of bringing Banner 18 home, but I mean the way they brought it and the way that they've now gotten. I mean, look, it's all about incremental progress. Like basically every great player that's ever won a title has had either that signature playoff loss or a finals loss or whatever it
Something.
may be. Now,
Yeah.
nothing is given. Like that's the thing is the Eastern Conference is still going to be really good next year. Miami's coming back. Brooklyn's going to be better. You think Milwaukee is still looming again, fully healthy. You feel like they're going to have something to prove after the way they went out with Chris not playing this year. So
Hmm.
nothing is given in this league. But I think if you're Boston, you have a really great coach to build around in Ime Udoka. Phenomenal first year for him. You've got the blueprint essentially. You just need to make minor tweaks to it, like you say. The big questions were: can Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown get you to the top level? Can they play together? That's what we've been talking about the past few years. You answered all that this year. I think for Jason Tatum, you need to get him working on contact and finishing through contact this summer. I think with Jaylen Brown, you need to lock him in a room with somebody with like 5 pads and just hammer him while he's dribbling the basketball. I think you just literally have him work on his handle
Just
all
yeah,
summer long.
lower the turnovers in general, and you guys are golden. Like so one thing I did hear, and I think Windhorse was the one talking about it. They were talking about getting a quote quote true point guard
Yeah.
to play next to Smart so that Smart can play more off ball,
Uh-huh.
and focus on getting his shot and obviously the defense side of things. I mean, maybe, but I don't think you need to go out and get a flashy name like that. You know what I mean?
No, I think you can get. I mean, the question
And
is
well,
who's
hold on.
available.
I would also say too, you kind of did that twice, and both times it didn't work with Kyrie and Kemba. Like you went and got a point guard, and I'm not sure if it fully worked. I understand those guys are scorers too, but it didn't really work. So I'm a little sensitive to Boston going out and getting a point guard like that.
I don't entirely disagree because you're right. Obviously, they didn't work for radically different
Sure.
situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't think they need someone to that caliber. Obviously, it
No.
would be great
I
if you get
think
another star, but
I feel
to
like I
me,
heard on ESPN, I think he was talking to Greeny. I think he mentioned like a Tyus Jones or somebody like that's
okay,
essentially not a huge name, but is a
yeah.
point guard
I
and
heard
doing
Ricky
your thing.
Rubio floated a lot. It was kind of a little like here's the thing. Sure, go get a point guard. I don't
But does
disagree
that
with
yeah.
that. I also think it was really weird that everyone kind of reacted that way after game 6, where it was like, they
Yeah.
need a point guard. They need a point guard. It just
I
like it
didn't
felt like all at
yeah.
once that NBA Twitter hive mind had that thought. And it's like, guys, they've been fine with Marcus Smart playing point all year. Like we're here in the NBA finals. Like, what are we talking about? I don't think to me it was the bench. I mean, that was
Yeah.
where I think Boston just needs to get a little more depth. The bench was great during the season, but they just completely vanished in the last few games of the finals. I mean, they had 5 total points in game 6. Derek White obviously was
Yeah.
phenomenal for them for a long time. He kind of went MIA on the finals, but I think you've got one there. Obviously, a
Well,
really good trade deadline pickup.
even in the last game, I mean, he I forget the minutes he played, but he shot He was
He
1
was
for
1 of 6.
16.
He
Yeah.
played 16 minutes. I mean, the
Okay,
only
16.
3 major bench guys that were playing at the end of it were Grant Williams and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. Pritchard couldn't hit the broadside of a barn this series. I mean, he just wasn't hitting anything, which
Yeah,
obviously
he
hurt them a
disappeared.
ton,
He disappeared,
because he
yeah.
was great over this playoff run. Same with Grant Williams. Grant Williams is a little different because he's a much better defender than Peyton Pritchard is. And I mean, look at what Grant did in that game 7 in the Milwaukee series. Like, he became a folk hero that game. So
Well,
Grant's fine. Like, I'm not worried about them like long term. I just think they need a little more depth on that front. Like, just those, spending into the tax to get the championship depth. The other thing you got to feel good about too, if you're Boston, is just that Rob Williams is going to
yeah.
be healthy. I mean, look at what he did this year at playing maybe 70-80%
I
at best.
doubt
He
it was
was
even that. That dude
everywhere.
looked every time he went up for a shot, I was like, "Oh, this is the one where his knee just can't." You know what I mean? Like, you were just so
Yeah.
worried about it, and whenever he hit the floor, he was always
I
slow to
thought he was
get
done
up.
for the year. Every time he hit the floor, it looked
So
like it.
maybe there is an angle of like getting a really good backup center to play with Robert Williams or give him some rest. I don't know if that's
They
like
have
a
him and Al, though. Do you think they need
yeah.
it? I
No,
mean,
but
you've got Tice in emergency minutes. I don't want Tice playing in the finals
no.
necessarily, but it's like, they well, the thing about Al Horford too is you imagine when his deal is up that he probably will take a team-friendly deal. Like, I don't want to speak for that, obviously, but it sure seems like everything is that he was happy to be back in Boston, playing that OG role essentially. Obviously, he turned back the clock over this playoff run. Specifically in game 1, but even in game 5 and game 6, I mean, game 6 specifically, I mean, he's that third quarter, he single-handedly willed them back into that game. Like, the only reason
Mhm.
they even had a chance down the stretch is because of how well Al Horford played. He's not leaving Boston again. I mean, it's still kind of strange that he left to begin with. Obviously, I know he got more money from the Sixers, and
Yeah.
then once it was with OKC, it was kind of out of his hand or out of his control when he got traded. But I don't think there's a scenario where he's leaving Boston again. So maybe that helps you out a little bit. He's had multiple, I think at least one for sure $100 million plus contract at this point. But I mean, he was definitely making good money when he was with Atlanta too, and that first deal with Boston. So again, the Celtics are in a great position. They've got Jason Tatum, who's arguably a top 10 player right now, who's only going to get better. I
Mhm.
think Jaylen Brown really showed me a lot in the finals. I mean, I've been high on Jaylen Brown to begin with. Like, I've always thought that, I don't know, people always called him the number 2. And there have been multiple moments where I was like, I don't know that he's the number 2 there. I feel like he's just as good. But he really showed a lot to me, especially in terms of late in games, how he was able to finish through contact. Just work on that handle a little bit. But he is that guy,
Mhm.
thriving in a bigger role. Those are the 2 that you build everything around. And, again, just if you round out the bench, I think you're going to be fine for Boston. You're going to be able to make another run at this. Their structure is solid. You have faith in their front office. So, I mean, again, and really the theme of the finals of the Warriors and the Celtics, right, is that it was just these were built homegrown teams.
Mhm.
The Warriors basically, the only one that they went out and got was Wiggins. They got Wiggins in the trade. And for the Celtics, you had initially signed Al Horford as a free agent, but then going out and bringing him back via trade in the Kemba Walker deal. So, it was a testament to how well they were built from top to bottom. And I wonder too, this offseason, how many teams that, maybe and maybe part of this is with the Lakers too, just off how badly they underperformed this year. Maybe you see teams not try to go for as much as a splashy third star anymore, as much as just build the team, build the depth, like build a complete roster essentially. So that way, if one guy goes cold, it doesn't just fall off a cliff, or if
Yeah.
somebody gets hurt, it falls off a cliff. Obviously, there's multiple ways to success. We saw the Heat do this how many times with 3 big players, but it's not the guarantee as always, and it can go south pretty quickly. All right, who's balling, who's falling? Our NBA version of the stock market, we always like to start with the good before the bad. So we're going to switch things up a little bit here. I've actually got 2 balling this week, and Justin has 2 fallen. So we're going to alternate here. I'm going to start with balling. For me is Steve Kerr, who we haven't talked about yet. And a hat tip to Phoenix Uni on Reddit for the stat. With 33% of the last 27 NBA championships, Steve Kerr has
Wow.
won. This dude just knows nothing except winning. 9 rings now, 3 with the Bulls, 2 with the Spurs, and now 4 as the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Again, this is a situation where I feel like once KD left, people started to ask, as the Warriors drift out of contention, they're like, oh, was Steve Kerr really that good of a coach? Or is it just the players carrying him? Again, he doesn't need a legacy title, but this sure feels like a legacy title. And it puts Steve Kerr, I think, a lot higher in people's books on the coaching pantheon than it certainly was before. And again, didn't need it, but what can you say now? He did a phenomenal job. I loved all his adjustments. Like, he tried out some new lineups in the finals when things weren't going right.
And in 5
he pushed the right buttons.
And in 5 took out Draymond, and I think in a way that kind of gave him a little kick in the ass, to put it bluntly, which then we saw what he did in game 6 and saw him really, show up finally. So
he was so good towards the end of that series, man. Like, Again, he was rough at the beginning. There was no doubt about it. But it cracks up too. He's like, I forgot. I think it was. I think Mike Breen said it, or I don't remember if he or Van Gundy said it. But he was like, "Yo, his mom can't tweet about him anymore. Look at him, he's back."
Yeah,
that was funny. And shout to Mrs. Green. That was an incredible tweet.
And I think it's fair to assume. He has 9 rings. Like Kerr's probably going to get one more and fill out both his hands with rings, right? Like, he's going to get one for every finger.
No, you certainly, the odds are there. Warriors, again, not a lock to repeat by any means, but they certainly, you would imagine, are right back in the mix. They're going to have that chance. With Draymond calling it the Warriors Invitational was funny. I laughed at that too. It is crazy though. You need to start. Again, when you think of NBA and you think of the ultimate winners, I know people will always go to Jordan because of 6-0 in the finals, but realistically, when you think about winning all the time, you got to go to Bill Russell and Red Auerbach, right? Bill Russell basically won the title every year he was in the league. Steve Kerr, man, he's close. Like, I'm trying to remember. I think, what did Bill have, 11 as a player and then 2 as a coach? Hang on, I'm Googling this real quick.
No, you're good.
Now.
But even so, that itself is going to be, I think the big argument, like you were saying, always goes back to the players that are around there. And it's like, how much coaching do you have to actually do? And I would say, I think a very recent example of that would be Spoelstra. We used to say that with him when he had Wade and LeBron and Chris Bosh. And we're all like, how much coaching do you really have to do? And I know it is a lot of ego and player management, but look at Spoelstra now. He's still regarded as one of the better coaches. And so, there's a big part of that too. And I think that same conversation can come for Kerr.
Yeah, so the 13 number that in my head for Bill Russell is because he had the 2 college titles as well. But no, so 11 NBA championships. Again, at one, Bill was coaching at the end too, so he had a little bit of the crossover as well. Obviously, a lot more as a player than Steve Kerr. But yeah, when you talk about the guys just running it up and having rings like that, gotta start talking about it. Him and Robert Horry, of course. Big shot, Bob. But all right, who's falling for you this week? Who's the first one?
First one falling for me is going to be Bill Simmons on his podcast. He essentially said that
stupid ass comment.
He essentially said Curry, Dre, and Clay are not a dynasty. And you didn't really fully explain why, but from the transcript, it sounded like the reason that you can't call it a dynasty is because they had the quote second pick in the lottery one of those years. So they dropped off real hard just to bounce right back. So I kind of understand what he's trying to say, but I don't think that makes them not a dynasty, No,
I don't understand what he's trying to say at all. He's so far in the forest that he's not seeing the trees. What are you talking about? You had one bad year, so that doesn't make you a dynasty. The Bulls had 2 kind of down years when MJ wasn't there. Kind of down years. Like, they're still really good, but no, that's insane. And if that's the logic, is that it's spread out, then the Spurs aren't a dynasty either, which is also an insane conversation. Like, I understand the not winning back to back. That's the hallmark of the Bulls. It's the hallmark of the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe is winning all those in a row. And there is something to be said about winning them in a row, but it's like the Warriors have back to back. They made the finals 6 out of 8 seasons over that stretch. Yeah, I know they only won 4 of them, but it's like, no, that's insane. Just what are we trying to do here? Like, what is the purpose? It just sounds like Boston salt.
Well, that's also
only because it's from Bill Simmons.
Yeah, that's also probably part of it. So, it's going to be
I mean, dude, the Celtics in the 80s never won back-to-back. They won at 81,
yeah.
84, and 86. Like, does that make them less of a dynasty?
No. And I'll say it'll be fun. Like, there's definitely going to be a documentary about this because there's a documentary about everything these days. But also, this is a very special moment in the NBA. So it'll be cool to go back and revisit this years down the line when we've forgotten about this moment. That's my beef with documentaries in general. It's like we're getting them too quickly now. Like we're getting documentary. Like who the MGK is getting a documentary. Like, why do we need a MGK documentary? You know what I mean? Like the dude is still touring. Like, can
Justin,
we?
I don't. This is not a political comment. Did you see the picture of Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry and MGK?
Oh, dude, it's his second one.
Dude, that was one of the funniest things I have ever seen in my life.
Hey, listen, I'm not going to get into the politics of it either, but the dude didn't show up for Jacksonville's 200th anniversary.
It's a little weird.
But he can go take a photo with MGK. That's all I'm leaving out there. I just don't understand. Like, the only thing about the MGK documentary is I hope they address the Eminem situation, which I've heard they won't. So,
well, so it's kind of, but to your greater point with documentaries, that's kind of just content now, right? Like that's how it.
Yeah.
So I thought about this the other day. Because
we need a new name for it. Documentary to me feels like it has to be a historical. Like I don't know. Like if I hear documentary, like I'm thinking it's something that happened in the past. I'm gonna get the right or like. I don't know, like, if you're doing an MGK documentary, do it years after he's retired playing music and is no longer with us so that we can remember the moments if we want to remember the moments. Like, I don't know. It just feels if like Olivia Rodrigo, another pop star, just because I work, she got a documentary. She's like 16. Like, what are we doing?
Well, I think is with sports, everyone is now just going to try to emulate The Last Dance because of how good The Last Dance was. I just Last Dance was great because it's been years. Like that's
right, like
why
let it calm down. I don't want to don't give me a documentary on the 2022 season the week after the let the season be over for a while.
Well, and you can do behind the scenes and do Insta reacts and stuff like that. Like I'm interested in that content. When the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I literally ate up every piece of video footage that you could find from that game. But no, but I'm with you just in content in general, though, because I'm not trying to derail this real quick, but I'm going to derail this real quick. All the shows for me came back at once, essentially. Like I went from having no shows that I was actively watching to having like 6 or 7 with no warning, basically, where it's like Stranger Things came back and The Boys came back and Better Call Saul was on and Barry was on and Kenobi's out and Miss Marvel's out now. And it's just like there is no let up anymore.
Which I'll tell you. That first episode of The Boys season 3, my lord!
Listen, do not watch that around your parents or with someone that you are not comfortable with.
Holy moly!
Wow, The Boys is probably the most outrageous TV show I've ever seen.
And I don't think this is really giving anything away. I hope it's not. If it is, Kevin, tell me before and I'll take it out post edit. But the subtle Kylie Jenner diss. I loved every second of it.
Oh, what part was that?
If you haven't seen it, I'm not telling you then.
I feel like I maybe I'll text you off the thing. I don't want to spoil this now because I'm caught up. Like I know
it has to do with the Pepsi commercial.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. I know what you're talking about. That was definitely funny. Yeah. Okay.
I was like, yes, I love this.
Hilarious.
Thank you.
Yeah, really funny. No, it's a great show for sure. It also makes me very uncomfortable in ways that I didn't know I could be uncomfortable. But that's an entirely.
Can you imagine the writing room when that scene was pitched?
Yeah. I just want to be in that writing room.
How did you think of that?
I can't. That's got to be one of, if not the funniest writing rooms you possibly could be in.
It's gonna be crazy.
We could do a lot because I've been putting a blender a lot by TV. Barry and Better Call Saul messed me up, and Better Call Saul's not even done it. I hear Stranger Things is incredible too. I know you're up on that, right?
Yeah, have you watched Stranger Things? I'm all caught up. Yet. You will be, yeah.
I'm excited. I'm really excited. Like I said, a lot of TV came back at once. Got overwhelmed.
So the bad guy, quote unquote bad guy in this season, they're calling him Vecna.
Mm-hmm.
When you find out the connections, you're like, whoa,
I'm
Holy
excited.
cow. Yeah,
No, I'm
yeah.
ready. I'm excited.
And there's a
But
lot of obviously like spoiler theories of trying to tie certain things back to previous seasons that people are finding now. So
right.
it's pretty cool.
All right, so back to who's balling, who's fallen. Ballin, my second ballin is LeBron James, and there's someone out there groaning, going, "Why are we talking about LeBron James on this podcast when he's not doing anything?" It's actually because he is the only active non-Warrior right now with 4 championship rings. There are 5 players in the league currently, assuming Iguodala is not retiring, that have 4 rings:
Mhm.
Iggy, Clay, Dre, and Steph, and then LeBron. So that's it. Rarefied air.
I was trying to see if he tweeted about Curry yet. He hasn't. He's
Can I
still
play?
in.
Hey, Steph, can I come to Golden State now?
Yeah, like,
LeBron's the
wow,
new KD.
I was, like, very convinced there was gonna be a tweet about it, but he
Dude,
hasn't. His
if
last tweet is
LeBron
about
went to
Tom
Golden
Hanks.
State, it would be an all-time Twitter day. An
Oh,
all-time Twitter day.
oof, oof,
There's also
oof.
no planet where that would ever happen. But all right, who's falling for you this week? Who's the second one?
Well, the second one for me is fake Clay. I think it was what is it, game 5, where the situation where he snuck on the court and had warm-up shots for, like, 10 minutes before security realized what was happening. So
Yeah.
he got banned for life, and I think it was a $10,000 fine or something like that. And then Twitter started being like, "Free fake Clay," and I think Patrick Beverley offered to have him come to some of their games, and it's just like, why? One, I don't understand why we're rewarding that. Like, he obviously did what he did for content, knowing that, one, he would probably get in trouble. So I just don't get why we're suddenly like, oh, free fake Clay. It's like, no, the dude did something wrong. He snuck onto the court. He snuck past security. He should be gone, and he is gone. So
Well, yeah,
it is
it's
what
a
it is.
play stupid games, play stupid prizes thing. Like, I don't think that necessarily, like, if if you want to let him off eventually, is it worth a lifetime ban? I don't know. Maybe not necessarily. Like, there will be an appeals process one day, but like, no, you're right. The sympathy aspect is weird. Like, yes,
Yeah,
I am greatly concerned that he was able to do that and walk into the Chase Center because, like you said, he could have gone into the locker room. He was clearly on the court shooting jumpers. Like, this was not like, there are plenty of problems that can be addressed. And I get the point of, oh, well, he pointed out security issues. Like, maybe that should be fixed.
sure.
Sure, worry about that internally. You also just aren't, like, come on. Like, what are you expecting to happen here? Like, that's what you did. You
He
knew that it
did
was
it.
going to have a consequence, and you're just
Yeah,
kind of like looking for sympathy on the internet, and I just don't really
and he
have
got
any.
it.
Like, you knew
And
what
he
it
got
was.
it. He got it though. Like, he definitely got sympathy there. But it's like, bro, you went out there to create content. You did that knowing the risk and what would probably happen. You
It's just
got
like
your content and you got your punishment. So let's
my
move on.
guy, you're sitting courtside at tons of Warriors games. Like, you just basically, like, you threw that away for a YouTube video that people are probably going to forget about in like 3 months.
Right. Well, hopefully, I mean,
I
you
mean,
can
it's
make
cool. We
some
got to
good.
shoot around Chase Center. Like, it's definitely cool. I would love to
You
go shoot
can
around at Amway.
listen. You can make some good money off YouTube. So as long as you made more than 10,000 off that video, it's justified.
Nah, whatever, something like that. Uh,
So
so it's crazy because the finals just ended, but the beautiful part of this now is essentially that we don't even have to wait to get into the off season, more or less. We do have the draft coming up, and we're going to have a draft preview, guys, or a draft preview episode, I should say, for you guys coming up here next week. But we do have some trade action already, and it's not a small one either. Christian Wood going to Dallas in a 5-team deal. Boban Marjanovic, our guy, Trey Burke, Marquise Chris, and Sterling Brown are also going to Houston. They're giving up the number 26 as well. Again, this is just straight up for Christian Wood. My initial reaction is I'm going to go get my coats out because I just didn't realize that this was going to be this big of a fleecing. Like, I can't believe how little Dallas gave up to get Christian Wood. And I know the situation was bad there a little bit in Houston last year with him. Like, there were some things behind the scenes going on, but you basically got him for a 26. Like, is Christian Wood not already better than most likely who you're going to have there at that 26 pick? And for Dallas, this is the type of swing you take. I mean, you're already in the conference finals last year. It felt like you were going in the right direction. You just add another offensive piece to go around with Luka. Now you've got those two. You've got, again, they needed kind of that power forward. They need more bigs, if you will. Christian Wood is not a 5. He's going to be playing a lot of 4. But, between Wood now, between Luka, assuming you bring Jalen Brunson back, you've got a lot of offense there. You get a
Yeah.
traditional big, and again, I like Dallas loading up because this puts them in a situation where they have enough good players, so if they need to put a star package together, they can, or they add just another quality piece to go around Luka and build on what they did last year. I think it's a clear win for them. Assuming Christian Wood just cooperates, which I don't see why he wouldn't, playing with Luka. It feels like a great situation there. For Houston, you get the first rounder, and look, I know you're rebuilding. They're just trying to accumulate as much young talent as possible, but did you really get anyone of use here? I mean, Marquise Chris has been a fringe player in and out of the league. Trey Burke was way out of Dallas's rotation at this point. It kind of feels like the book's been written. Boban's great for commercial purposes, and he'll give you some backup center minutes, but it feels like they probably could have got more here than just 26 essentially for Christian Wood. I'm struggling to see the upside here.
Yeah, I mean, for Dallas, it makes all the sense in the world. I think the only maybe subtle sub point to make on that would be that in his, I guess it's 7 seasons, he's been on 7 different teams. So I think there's a level of potential concern there. There might be a little something going on with that and his ability to be a good teammate, which we've heard a little bit about with the background talk in Houston. But he might have just been frustrated with the situation there too. So to that with Dallas, I mean, yeah, I love the move for Dallas. And I think the one thing that is kind of a low key point that maybe it took me by surprise for sure is that he shoots. I mean, last year, Christian Wood shot 39% from 3. So in terms of spacing the floor and helping out with Luka and stuff like that, he is going to be a 3-point threat. He might not be taking it every time, but the fact that he can shoot the 3, he can get you some points down low. He's going to get you close to 10 rebounds a game. I'm all about it. Again, what's that?
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, he averaged 18 and 10 last year, basically. Like you said, he's a threat off the 3. He's an alley-oop threat. You can run the pick and roll with him. I mean, yeah, like you said, him bouncing around is definitely a bit of a red flag at this point. I'll also say that I don't feel like Christian Wood got an ample opportunity necessarily early on in his career.
No.
Some of those bounce arounds, I think, was just kind of him finding his way. But no, I don't see the downside. I mean, here's the reality, too. If this just stinks and goes completely wrong, he's on the last year of a deal. He's got 1 year left on his contract. You basically let him walk for 26. I think this is the type of deal that you make if you're Dallas. It's one that only has upside. And if worst case, if that's the cost of doing business, you give up the number 26 picks. It stinks, but it's not the end of the world. It's not going to cripple your franchise.
Well, and apparently I was reading that he was apparently in contract extension talks with the Rockets before the trade. So who knows what really went down there. But
and he'll be eligible for one. 6 months in, he'll be eligible.
Again,
if it goes well, they'll be able to negotiate a little bit. But like I said, there's options to get out of it or double down.
Yeah, and from the Rockets standpoint, like you said, I don't fully understand it. I'll just hold off to see whoever they get at 26. Maybe it works out, but it seems like they sold pretty low on Christian Wood, and maybe there was a within the NBA realms of coaching, text conversations, there was an understanding that Christian Wood wanted out, or maybe they knew. So maybe that's where the value was lowered, but it just feels low.
Yeah, I mean, or you're going to move up. That's the thing is they do have multiple picks. If you've got 26 and you've got 17, you in theory could package those two with somebody and get higher up in the lottery if you have. Yeah. And then in that case, I think it makes a little more sense, but I'm not going to lie. In a vacuum, I get it. Extra first round pick. We know how important of a commodity they are in today's NBA, but if there's not something else with this, it sure feels like for a rebuilding team, I just think they could have got a little bit better value here. It feels like they sold a little lower than they had to. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys, as always. We say this every time at the end of the year, but just because the finals are over doesn't mean that we are done. We do keep the podcast going all summer long. And so next up, we'll have a draft preview. Our guy Andy Jordan is coming on. He's going to break down a lot of prospects. We're going to talk about the top 10, some sleepers, if we expect any teams to move up, make any splashy moves. Andy, of course, a big Orlando guy too, so we're going to get his perspective on number one, with there not really being a clear number one. I mean, this is the first year in a couple where, like last year, everybody knew it was going to be Cade Cunningham. It was the slam dunk number one pick. This year, you legitimately got some options with Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren and Paulo Banchero. So we will see what happens. Excited for that. Of course, we'll have some draft reacts and plenty of trades and free agency stuff going to be going on as well. So stay tuned. You can find us anywhere you find a podcast: Apple Music, Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Music, Google Play Store, TuneIn, Stitcher, anywhere you find a podcast. Again, you can find us.
Yep, and looking for number 39 on 39 or 29? 39 on
No, it's definitely 39. Yeah. We ain't going backwards.
On YouTube. So hit us up, Drive and Dish NBA on YouTube. You can find us there. We appreciate you guys watching, and we will catch you next time.